Hello, welcome back. Oh my gosh, so good to see you here. Welcome to part 2 of our boundary series on the Radiant You podcast. If you haven't listened to part 1, I encourage you to go back and check it out. Yeah, today we are building on what we discussed and diving into the how-to of boundary setting, how they tie into self-love and radiance. I'm Lisa Cole. I'm your host of the Radiant You podcast, and I am thrilled to have you here with me. So let's get ready. Grab a notebook, your journal, or something that you can write on. Grab your pen, pencil, and if you're driving, just listen and go back and take notes later. Anyways, oh my gosh, let's also get settled in with your tea, your coffee, or whatever you need to just be fully in this space with me. Let's take a quick look about what we discussed last time. Our acronym Y-O-U. Y is yes, O is ourselves and others, and U is unique and understanding. Y-O-U. We discussed the Y of you. You say yes to you each time that you say no. Wow, let me say that again. You say yes to you each time you say no. It builds your self-esteem. It builds your self-confidence. But it usually takes encouragement to make yourself a priority and to persist, especially when you receive pushback. Setting healthy boundaries permits you to be you. It communicates what you stand for, what you're willing to do, and what you will never do. They are guidelines you set in order to let others know what is okay and not okay with you. It's telling the truth about how you feel and about what you do and do not want and need. Awareness helps with healing and self-love. Self-love means prioritizing ourselves and giving ourselves permission to find and believe in our strengths and gifts. Sometimes it means putting ourselves first. Sometimes it means making space to identify our needs and wants. Self-love involves setting boundaries, and setting boundaries involves self-love. Self-love and boundaries are deeply intertwined. Each one reinforces and sustains the other. When you cultivate self-love, you naturally develop the ability to set and uphold boundaries that honor your well-being. At the same time, setting boundaries is an act of self-love because it protects your energy, emotional health, and personal growth. Let's see how self-love supports boundary setting. It really helps recognize your worth. When you truly value yourself, you don't accept situations, relationships, or behaviors that undermine your well-being. Self-love gives you the clarity to say, I deserve respect, peace, and balance. Listening to your needs. Self-love involves tuning into your emotions and honoring your limits. This means noticing when something feels draining, overwhelming, or misaligned with your values, and having the courage to set a boundary accordingly. Releasing guilt. Many people struggle to set boundaries because they fear disappointing others. Self-love helps you let go of the guilt that comes with saying no and reminds you that prioritizing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Confidence in your decisions. Loving yourself fosters self-trust, making it easy to stand firm in your boundaries rather than second guessing or over explaining them. Now let's look at how boundaries strengthen self-love. Protects your energy. Boundaries create space for rest, reflection, and things that nourish you. They help prevent burnout and resentment, allowing you to show up as your best radiant self. Clarifying relationships. Healthy boundaries teach others how to treat you. When you communicate your limits, you attract relationships that honor and respect you. Fostering authenticity. Setting boundaries means living in alignment with your truth. This builds self-trust and deepens your sense of self-worth. Encouraging growth. When you honor your boundaries, you reinforce the belief that you matter. This ongoing practice strengthens your inner resilience and self-respect. Self-love and boundary setting create a powerful cycle of growth. The more you love yourself, the stronger your boundaries become. The stronger your boundaries, the more you cultivate self-love. Each moment of honoring your needs reinforces your worth, making it easier to continue choosing yourself in big and small ways. I'd like to quickly review the 6 types of boundaries that we discussed last time and just give a few examples. We have physical, sexual, intellectual, emotional, material, and time. Physical boundaries. These relate to your personal space, body, and physical well-being. They define how close others can get to you and what types of touch or interaction feel comfortable. A healthy boundary here is, I'm not a hugger, but I'd love to shake hands. A violated boundary here is someone standing too close despite you stepping back. Sexual boundaries. These define what is acceptable in sexual interactions, including consent, comfort levels, and personal preferences. Healthy boundary would be, I need to build emotional trust before being sexually intimate. A violated boundary, pressure to engage in sexual activity against your will. Intellectual boundaries. These involve your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. They help protect your right to your own opinions and ensure respectful discussions. A healthy boundary would be, I respect your perspective, but I have a different viewpoint. A violated boundary, someone dismissing or ridiculing your beliefs. Emotional boundaries. These define how much emotional energy you give and protect your ability to separate your emotions from others. They prevent involvement or emotional manipulation. A healthy boundary here would be, I can support you, but I can't take responsibility for your feelings. A violated boundary would be someone guilt-tripping you into fixing their problems. Material boundaries. These relate to your possessions, finances, and resources, ensuring you have control over how they are shared or used. A healthy boundary would be, I'm happy to lend you my book, but I need it back by Friday. A violated boundary, someone taking or using your belongings without asking. A time boundary. These help you manage your time and energy, ensuring that your commitments align with your priorities. A healthy boundary here would be, I can meet for coffee, but only for an hour. A violated boundary. a friend repeatedly showing up late, or demanding your time excessively. Each of these boundaries is a way of honoring yourself, and maintaining them is an ongoing act of self-love. Okay, it's time to explore the O of Y-O-U. The O of you. But I want to remind you that this podcast is not a substitute for any therapy. Although I am a licensed therapist, this is not therapy. This is education and support and encouragement and empowerment. So please, if you are in need of further help, please reach out to your nearest therapist, your nearest facility that can help you. So let's move on. Okay, we're exploring the O of the Y-O-U. So the O is ourselves and others. It stands for boundaries that are placing our needs with the needs of others. So let me say that again. Boundaries are about balancing our needs with the needs of others. And remember, I've told you at the very beginning that I'm not perfect, and neither is this. So I'm going to have some oops. So that was an oops. But anyways, I'm going to repeat it. Boundaries are about balancing our needs with the needs of others. A quote from Mel Robbins: "Letting things slide to keep the peace only starts a war inside of you." So we're going to look at 6 of the most common barriers or challenges to healthier boundaries. Then we'll see which of these barriers might apply to you and explore ways to overcome them. You tell yourself it's them, not me. When you assume that the other person needs to change in order for the relationship to improve, you fail to realize that you have control in the situation. Another, you tell yourself, I tried it once and it failed. Just because you set a boundary one time and it didn't immediately change things doesn't mean that it's a lost cause or not worthy of trying again. You misinterpret what boundaries are. Many people think that boundaries are only about saying no. That's not true. The boundary setting is also about redirecting other people to solve their own problems, expressing your emotions more transparently, and delegating tasks. You're not aware that you need to set boundaries. It's kind of similar to the first one, where it says it's them, not me. Many people aren't even aware that there are boundaries that need firming up. Many times this is because people are not in tune with their own needs. You focus on the worst case scenario. You might be flooded with the thoughts like, what if they hate or leave me? What if I say the wrong thing? Or am I being selfish or petty? Even though these worst case scenarios are the least likely to occur, you have difficulty tolerating the discomfort of setting boundaries. Setting boundaries can be uncomfortable, and that discomfort is often enough for some of us, for most of us, to shy away from setting them. But short-term discomfort is worth having a healthy relationship over the long term. Let me say that again. But short-term discomfort is worth having a healthy relationship over the long term. Do any of these barriers resonate with you more than others? Why? Do Do you find that different barriers apply in different relationships? Can you think of a counter argument to help you overcome each barrier? How might you utilize the counter argument in your life? People who struggle with boundaries often struggle to tolerate uncomfortable feelings in general. One of the most common pitfalls of successful boundary setting is the belief that you won't be able to handle the potential emotional discomfort afterward. This is especially the case if the other person responds to your boundary by pushing back. Believe me, you will get pushback. Testing your limits, getting defensive, or ghosting you altogether. In these moments, feelings like guilt, fear, sadness, remorse, awkwardness can take over. So it's important to find ways to comfort and soothe yourself before the feelings get to be too much. Remember, feelings are not facts, and it's completely normal to feel uncomfortable when trying new things. And remember, all of this, it takes practice. These new things, these new boundaries, they take practice. And you also might experience more than one emotion at a time, like relief in finally setting that boundary, and worry about how it might be received. But that doesn't mean setting the boundary is wrong or was wrong. We're going to take a look at healthy versus unhealthy relationships and boundaries. Healthy boundaries promote closeness and mutual respect. Unhealthy boundaries lead to resentment, conflict, or disconnection. Here's the thing. Boundaries exist on a continuum, ranging from rigid to porous to healthy. Understanding where you fall on this spectrum can help you create stronger, more balanced relationships with yourself and others. Understanding this is foundational to boundary work. Rigid boundaries, these involve strict limits, often to the point of emotional distance or isolation. People with rigid boundaries may avoid vulnerability, struggle to ask for help, or keep others at arm's length to protect themselves from being hurt. Porous boundaries, these are too loose, leading to oversharing, difficulty saying no, or feeling responsible for others' emotions. Individuals with porous boundaries may prioritize others' needs at their own expense, leading to burnout and resentment. This might be people-pleasing. Healthy boundaries. These strike a balance between openness and protection. People with healthy boundaries understand their needs. They're aware. They communicate them clearly and respect both their own limits and those of others. They can say no without guilt, accept help when needed, and maintain a sense of self while fostering meaningful connections. Do you have certain relationships where you tend to be more porous or rigid? Why do you think that is? Shifting toward healthy boundaries. How can we get the rigid and porous boundaries healthier? Rigid boundaries soften with connection. Share feelings and ask for support in safe relationships. Identify fears driving your emotional walls. Say yes to low-risk interactions to build trust. Allow others to support you as you support them. Porous boundaries strengthen with self-respect. Practice saying no without over-explaining. Pause before saying yes. Does this align with my needs? Care for others without absorbing their emotions. Set small limits to build confidence in enforcing boundaries. Maintaining healthy boundaries. Regularly check in on your own needs and limits. Communicate clearly. Boundaries aren't just about saying no. Stay firm, yet adaptable when necessary. I often will say there that it's okay to come up with a new agreement. Which area feels like your biggest challenge? Saying no, trusting others, or balancing both? Which relationships in your life have healthier boundaries? As we've talked about, you can have different boundaries with different people for different reasons. For example, your boundaries can vary with the setting you're in, your history with that other person, the power differences that you might feel in the relationship. This means that you can have healthy boundaries with certain people, but unhealthy boundaries with others. Who in your life would you like to set healthier boundaries with? Here are some signs that can help you with your awareness of your current boundaries or lack of them. These are indicators that you might need to set stronger boundaries with someone. You dread interacting with them. You need to unwind after talking to them. You frequently ignore their calls or text. You no longer have the energy to care. You find that you feel like you're betraying your own values. You feel exhausted, sad, or anxious after interacting with them. You might make up excuses to spend less time with them. You experience physical symptoms of anxiety, like stomach aches or headaches, when thinking about or interacting with them. Why would you like to improve your boundaries with this person or these people? How do you think this person would respond to you setting these boundaries? What would a new or healthier boundary look like in that relationship? Let's look at what healthy boundaries look like and sound like. Although you might want to have healthier boundaries, sometimes it can be confusing to know what to say or do in certain situations to enforce your boundaries in a way that is kind, respectful, and effective. Listen to what they might look like. I'm looking at a different page. That's why I'm moving my head. Sorry. Told you it wasn't perfect. Listening to your own opinion. Sound like, I know you meant well, but I know what is best for me. Look like, being comfortable saying no. Sound like, please respect my decision. Look like, being comfortable hearing no. Sound like, understood. Thanks for considering my offer. Look like, asking someone to listen instead of giving advice. Sound like, I would like you to listen without offering solutions. Look like, starting and ending a meeting on time. Sound like, I want to respect everyone's time, so we'll need to pause until next time. Look like, requesting clarity about something. Sound like, I am not sure I understand what you mean. Can you provide more details? Look like, moving away from someone who is in your space. Sound like, I need a few moments to myself. Look like, staying home. Sound like, I can't make it to blank today. Thank you for the invite. Look like, declining a second date. Sound like, I'm not interested in going out again. Look like, responding to an insulting comment. Sound like, what you said was offensive to me. Please don't say that again. Look like, keeping information private. Sound like, that's not something I'd like to share. Look like, not loaning money or a possession. Sound like, I'm not comfortable with that. Is there another way I can support you? These are healthy boundaries and how they look and sound. Hopefully that helps. Do any of those boundaries resonate with you more than others? Do you see behaviors or statements on that list that you didn't realize were boundaries? What is an example from your life that you could add to this list? Next, we're going to look at what are not boundaries. We're going to try and come up with the difference between assertive boundary setting and attempts to control others' behavior. Remember, boundary setting is not about controlling other people. It's about defining your own limits to another person's behavior. You only can control you, not other people. There's a big difference between setting healthy boundaries and asserting yourself in an effort to control someone else's behavior or force them to respect your wishes. Let's look at this list of what a healthy boundary is not. Pushing someone to think and be like you. Managing areas of someone's life that have no impact on you. Basically, not minding your own business. A new phrase that someone had shared with me is, you're not staying in your own lane. Demanding that people change for you. Issuing threat-based ultimatums. Manipulating people into changing their behavior. Creating rules for how others should do things in their lives. Remember the shoulds? I don't want anybody shoulding on me. Shoulds are other people's expectations of you. Do you have shoulds for others? Telling people what's best for them. Determining what another person can and can't do in their life. These strategies are all ineffective because they reflect attempts to control other people into meeting your own needs. Healthy boundaries are never about controlling someone else or manipulating them into getting what you want. Instead, they are about setting limits over what you are willing or unwilling to tolerate. Ultimately, there is only one thing that you can control. And in your life, it's you. 3 steps to setting a boundary. 1, clearly state the boundary violation or your limits. Describe exactly what the other person said or did that violated your boundaries, or assert your limits in the situation. Mind your tone and keep it simple. Number 2, directly state what you need and want, or say no. What would you like to change? What do you want to see next time? What would make you feel safe? Use phrases like, I want, I need, I expect, or next time. Number 3, tend to your discomfort. We talked about that earlier. New skills are always uncomfortable and can evoke guilt, fear, sadness, remorse, awkwardness, indifference, and even relief. Allow yourself to feel the way you feel. Engage in self-care, self-love, and practice self-talk to manage the discomfort. Saying no to a request can be challenging at first. When faced with the need to tell someone no, you might have the urge to respond with an unnecessary apology or an explanation or a story. But remember, no is truly a complete sentence. You can just decline someone's request with a simple one-word answer: no. People avoid setting boundaries for many reasons. Even when setting a boundary would help them find more satisfaction in their relationships and lives. People often say they set a boundary, but it didn't help. Believe me, there is an art to setting boundaries. If it's done in anger or nagging, like, I've told you 100 times, you won't be heard. Boundaries are not meant to punish, but are for your well-being and protection. They're more effective when you're assertive, calm, firm, and courteous. If that doesn't work, you may need to communicate the consequences to encourage compliance. It's essential, however, that you never threaten a consequence you're not fully prepared to carry out. Remember when I said pushback happens? Not everybody will love your boundaries, and that's okay. Remember, when people give you pushback, sometimes they are those that struggle the most with boundaries themselves. And that's okay. Remember, boundaries are about your self-respect, not their approval. Some people may feel uncomfortable or even try to test your limits, but that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Stay firm and remind yourself why this boundary matters to you. Handling the rejections. Stay calm and confident, even if the other person reacts negatively. Reaffirm your boundary if needed, using clear and respectful communication. Like I said earlier, don't over-explain. Your boundary is valid, even if others don't understand it. If met with resistance, stand firm and prioritize your well-being over someone else's comfort, someone else's discomfort. Let me do that again. If met with resistance, stand firm and prioritize your well-being over someone else's discomfort. If someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries, you may have to disengage for your own peace and self-respect. If someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries, you may have to disengage for your own peace and self-respect. We're moving into the power of boundaries in stress management and setting boundaries with ourselves. Here we go. The power of boundaries in stress management. Boundaries are one of the most powerful tools we have for reducing stress. Yet they are often the hardest to set. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe that saying no is selfish, that we must always be available, and that prioritizing our well-being is somehow wrong. But the truth is, when we don't set boundaries, we invite the overwhelm, the resentment, and the exhaustion into our lives. When we set boundaries, we reduce overwhelm and resentment. Think about how often you have felt stretched too thin, saying yes when you really wanted to say no, taking on more than you could handle, or allowing relationships to drain your energy. Every time we ignore our own needs in favor of pleasing others, we build frustration and resentment, both toward ourselves and to those around us. Boundaries give us the ability to pause, assess what truly is manageable, and confidently say, this is what I can give and this is what I cannot. Boundaries help us focus on what truly matters, creating space for joy and fulfillment. When we're constantly overwhelmed, we don't have the capacity to be present for the things that brings us joy. Our attention is scattered, our energy is drained, and life starts to feel more like an endless to-do list than something to be enjoyed. But when we set boundaries, we reclaim our time and energy. We create space for the relationships, activities, and moments that truly nourish us. But boundaries aren't just about saying no to others. They are also about saying no to ourselves when needed. What self-boundaries do you want to improve on? How do you think your self-boundaries relate to the boundaries you'd like to establish with others? Can you think of any self-boundary practices that might be helpful for you? Sometimes the most difficult person to set a boundary with is ourselves. We overcommit, overwork, and push ourselves beyond those healthy limits, often ignoring our body's signals to slow down. Stress management isn't just about limiting external demands. It's also about regulating the internal pressures we place on ourselves. Here's where personal boundaries can come in. Setting limits on overworking and overgiving. If you constantly feel exhausted, ask yourself, am I respecting my own limits? Am I giving myself permission to rest? A personal boundary might look like setting a hard stop to your workday. committing to downtime, or declining requests that drain you. Regulating negative self-talk. The way we speak to ourselves matters. If your inner dialogue is filled with guilt, criticism, or unrealistic expectations, set a boundary by actively shifting your self-talk to be more compassionate and supportive. Sometimes we talk nicer, well, usually, very common, we talk nicer and kinder to others. We forget to have that same compassion and support to ourselves. Prioritizing self-care without guilt. Many of us push self-care to the bottom of our to-do list. Setting a personal boundary means prioritizing yourselves without feeling selfish. Whether that's taking a break, saying no to unnecessary obligations, or carving out time for activities that replenish you. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're pathways to a more balanced, joyful, and fulfilling life. The more we practice them, the more peace we invite in. So today, I encourage you to ask yourself, where in your life do you need to set a boundary with yourself? And how would honoring that boundary reduce stress and create more space for joy? Remember, the O in Y-O-U is also about others. So before I end, I want to share one more, I think, very important skill. How to recognize and honor other people's boundaries. Having a traffic light to guide us in assessing boundaries would be helpful. However, we can't tap into other ways. Oh my goodness. We can tap into other ways of being mindful and not overstepping. It all comes down to communication and being aware of other people's space. Here are 3 beginner rules to follow. Watch for cues. Noting social cues is a great way to determine another's boundary. When talking with someone and they step back when you step forward, you're being given information about their comfort level with closeness. Possible hints someone might want more space. Avoiding eye contact, turning away or sideways, backing up, limited conversation response, excessive nodding or ahhing. Voice suddenly becomes higher pitched. Nervous gestures like laughing, talking fast or talking with their hands, folded arms or stiffening posture, flinching, wincing. Number 2, be inclusive of the neurodiverse behaviors. Cues are a little different for everyone. Also, keep in mind that some people may use certain gestures all the time and may not provide cues, or may have different cues, or may not pick up on the subtleties of your cues. Number 3, ask. Never underestimate the power of asking. It is so powerful. You can inquire if a hug is okay, or if you can ask a personal question. Be aware. Pay attention. I want us to reflect a minute. Paying attention is a big deal. I think we're going to talk about that in a later podcast for sure. Boundaries are a lifelong practice. Each time you honor a boundary, you're honoring yourself. Don't forget, each time you honor a boundary, you're honoring yourself. This week, take one step to set or reinforce a boundary in your life. Notice how it feels and what shifts in you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this episode spoke to you, please hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone you care about. Let's continue to grow this radiant, self-loving, boundary-respecting community together. I really want you to know how thankful I am for you being here and for choosing to nurture your light. Remember, radiance is a journey, and simply showing up means you're already on the right path. Next podcast will be the U of the Y-O-U. I look forward to exploring more. And together we are exploring what it truly means to embrace, celebrate, and shine your beautiful, radiant self. Until next time, remember, saying yes to yourself is the ultimate act of self-love. Shine your light and be the radiant you. Bye-bye.